In 2015, Wizards of the Coast put literal treasure cards into the set Battle for Zendikar, and for me, as a collector, this Arid Mesa right here changed the entire way that I would approach Magic the Gathering. Let's talk about the time that I spent $3,000.
No, God!
Or maybe $3,500.
No, God, please, no!
Chasing expeditions from BFZ and Oath of the Gatewatch. In this video, we're going back to the plane of Zendikar, where we're going to talk about Middle Zendikar, not OG, not Zendikar Rising, but Battle for Zendikar. And this was a really important set because it was the first set to bring us treasure cards to the MTG multiverse. Currently, we live in the dark depths of the variant era of MTG, where everything has like 5 to 10 different versions, whether it's in a secret layer or a showcase frame or an extended art frame. This goes back to a time that predates all of that. We're going to take all of that knowledge and that hindsight that we have, and we're going to go back and look at some of MTG's first real treasure cards. And we're ultimately going to see why something like this will probably never ever happen in regular draft booster boxes ever again. Now, I'm sure all of you are excited to learn what I got for the $3,000 that I spent, or it may have been $3,500. I don't know, because Bank of America starts purging their records after 7 years, so I can't find the exact statements or the exact number. But I do have a relative idea based on some information I remember from my local game store. But before we go back and look at what I got for what I spent, it's important for us to understand the historical significance of Battle for Zendikar as it pertains to MTG Finance. You need to understand all of this information. That way you can effectively let me have it in the comments. I promise you won't learn too much, and I'm going to do my best to be brief. That way I don't lose you to a cat video that's definitely in your recommended. So for anyone who's scrolling through a price list of Battle for Zendikar, it's honestly a pretty disappointing set. There's an expensive Ulamog, which is like the good card from the set, then Void Winnower is worth some dollars, then you start to see a bunch of junk mythics. The Omnath and Foil is nice, but most of the cards from Battle for Zendikar, including the land cycle, are pretty forgettable. Zulaport Cutthroat came out of this set, so there's that. But within Battle for Zendikar is a list of cards that is much more desirable and much more difficult to find. It's also the reason that like 95% of Battle for Zendikar is absolutely junk and has no value even after being out for like 8 years. BFZ came out October 2nd of 2015, and oh, wouldn't it be nice to be in my 20s again. Now, this is a set that is unlike any other set, and it is so important, and as I mentioned before, it's because treasure cards were printed into draft packs in draft booster boxes. And I say draft booster boxes because it's important to note that anybody who has joined within the past few years, you would know that there's not only draft booster boxes, but set booster boxes, collector booster boxes, there's secret layer products, among all the other myriad of commander products that come out, pre-con commander decks. This is during a time where set booster boxes and collector booster boxes did not exist. There were bundles of Battle for Zendikar. There was a holiday product that looked like this. But within all of that were just regular draft booster packs. And within those packs, there were cards that either had a foil version or a regular non-foil copy. There were no extended art cards, there were no showcase treatments, or anything from the variant era. So I've now talked about the variant era twice, so let's get you caught up on what that is. It's pretty basic. Everything from Throne of Eldraine forward is the variant era. Everything before Throne of Eldraine is the pre-variant era, or just regular frames, foil treatments of cards. Throne of Eldraine forward, everything has an extended art frame that comes in a collector box. There's showcase treatments that come with every single set. Each set has its own unique look. Throne of Eldraine has storybook frames. Zendikar has the Hedron kind of frame. All of the different sets have something that's unique to the theme or the motif of that set. Throne of Eldraine is the first set that brought with it a collector product, and in those collector products there were showcase treatments, extended art cards. The extended art cards were actually something that we originally understood to be box toppers that were established in Ultimate Masters, but we later would see that every single collector product has extended art cards, and that is the general term that we see for these. So I guess you could say that Throne of Eldraine and Ultimate Masters are the start of the variant era. Fun fact, extended art foil cards were actually rare in Throne of Eldraine and only showed up in 2 to 4 packs per a 12-pack collector box. So if Battle for Zendikar came out 4 years before Throne of Eldraine, we really have to forget everything that we know about the variant era. We have to forget showcase cards, extended art cards. We have to forget all of the serialized stuff that we know today. And we have to go back to a simpler time where it was just draft packs and you had to get lucky and pull something incredibly, incredibly rare. And this is crucial information for understanding where MTG is today, especially if you're the kind of person who likes to keep up with the price of your collection and wants to get the most out of your cards. I'll never forget seeing the spoilers for Battle for Zendikar. Up until that point, all of the sets that I collected, everything that I've seen, it's all just like you have rares and mythics and then foil versions of each. And you're just trying to find the best mythic, and if you're lucky, get a foil of it. But in Battle for Zendikar, we started to see, during that spoiler season, along with the main set, we started to see these very amazing lands pop up. But first, let's talk about Khans of Tarkir, because that was a set that came out shortly before Battle for Zendikar, and it kind of helps establish why these lands were so important. Khans of Tarkir came out September 26, 2014, roughly a year before Battle for Zendikar, and it was a time where we got the Onslaught fetches reprinted. And for the time, I'm going to tell you, everybody was stoked just to get those fetch lands reprinted. It meant big things for the modern format, which up until that point only had the enemy fetches from Zendikar to support the fetch land base in that whole format. Khans of Tarkir was going to shake up modern because it was going to bring 5 fetch lands to the format for the first time ever. It's kind of a big deal. So many people were just opening the set endlessly to complete their fetch land play sets, and just stores just opening. Most of the set was decimated in price. And we actually, around the store, around that time, had a nickname for Khans of Tarkir, which was the Fetch Lands of Tarkir, which was because it was the only thing that anybody cared about from that set. It was a great set to draft because there were a couple times where I had a fetch land passed to me, because at that time, stuff like Wooded Foothills was like $8 and Bloodstained Mire was like $8. So people that were trying to win draft were just passing fetch lands. And so I ended up getting a couple of my fetch lands just from drafting back in Khans of Tarkir. So at this point, all 10 fetch lands are legal in modern, which is really important because modern is kind of like, or at that time was the lifeblood of MTG alongside Commander. It was a very popular format. Remember, this is pre-pandemic stuff, so it's like modern was a very, very vibrant format. I remember Affinity and Tron. I played a ton of modern tournaments just on Sunday, just show up at the LGS, get my butt whipped because I'm playing Mill or like Toper Orb, just like junk stuff. But it was a really fun time, and those 10 fetch lands finally being modern legal was such a big deal. Fast forward to a year later, and you're starting to see how Wizards of the Coast plan this out, right? You're starting to see how this works. When we start seeing the spoilers for Battle for Zendikar, it's a really big deal because alongside the main set, we start seeing these really cool cards pop up, and we're like, whoa, what is going on? Why are there fetch lands in Battle for Zendikar? Are these fetch lands going to be legal in standard? What is going on? Well, no, they weren't giving us reprints of the enemy fetch lands that would be legal in standard, but they were, for the first time, creating a set within a set. During that spoiler season, we would quickly come to realize that they were going to, in Battle for Zendikar, print not only all 10 fetch lands, but all 10 shock lands. 2 land cycles that are highly desirable in so many different MTG formats. There were also 5 other cards that we would really not want to see, like Cinderglade and Smoldering Marsh, which were the land cycle that came out of Battle for Zendikar. These are lands that you could tutor up, but again, because the set was open so much, they were just decimated in price. They're really just not that great. And so if you do get an Expedition land, it's a really big disappointment when it ends up being one of those. All of these cards were new, flashy, they had this amazing border, and we were all, as a community, just salivating over, like, Battle for Zendikar. We have to get there, we have to open, we have to see, what are they going to be worth? What is the value of them? As far as, like, are these going to be opened a lot? Are they going to be opened infrequently? Are they going to be extremely rare? Which catches us up to this point, the Arid Mesa, which changed how I would collect forever. Now, what's nuts about this card is I pulled it at the pre-release. There were maybe 50 people there. Only 2 of us pulled expeditions out of our pre-release kits. Mine, here, and another kid who was, he pulled a Misty Rainforest, and he knew everything about it. He was like, I'm selling it for $200 cash. He just knew. Like, he had already looked these up. He probably knew as much about BFZ as I did. And so, yeah, only 2 of us out of 50. So that gave everybody a pretty good idea. Whoa, these are rare. Up until that point, I had only ever been a collector in the sense that I started playing the game in 2009. I collected as a kid. This is my binder from when I was a child. You may recognize this. Within it, there's a bunch of like near mint stuff that's just never been played. I was actually really good about stopping my stuff from getting hit with hit on the rings in the binder, which can really mess things up. This thing is old and loved. It's kind of fallen apart a little bit, but I really do love these old binders with the old art. Visions has some really cool stuff on it. You can see Vampiric there. But more than anything, I always loved this thing on the back. That beautiful art. In 2009, everybody in college had started playing MTG, and after I gave them a hard time, I finally caved and I started playing MTG myself. So I reached out to my mom and I was like, Mom, you got to send me my binder from when I was a kid. And in that binder, I looked through, you know, as you're getting into the game, you're going to do what anybody does when you get your old cards. You're going to start looking them up. You're going to be like, what are these worth? And there were some standouts in there. There were some fun cards, but there were 2 cards that in particular, when I was in 2009, a broke college kid, I was like, holy crap. And it was a near mint Mox Diamond from Stronghold. And there was also a Grim Tutor from Starter 1999. Now, those 2 cards by themselves in mint condition at the time, the Grim Tutor I think was worth 200 because of scarcity, and the Mox Diamond being reserve list, I believe was around 80 at the time. I sold the Grim Tutor for $120 to Card Kingdom and the Mox Diamond for $40. Ouch. It's so sad to hear it, thinking back. But at the time, for me, $160 to a college kid for just selling off 2 cards, I was going to be able to buy more cards. I was going to be able to have some spending money. So for me, it was a good deal. I kept a lot of my other stuff, which I keep for nostalgia purposes, even though most of it isn't really worth much. The reason those cards are in such good condition is because as a kid, I had no idea how to play the game. There was no one to teach me at an LGS. I didn't want to be like, hey, mister, will you show me how to play Magic? And the little book, like, who can read this? It's so daunting. It's tiny. It's just a tiny little book. And so it has so many rules in it. And so as a kid, I was just like, my cousin and I, we would just be like, yeah, you want to just look at our Magic cards? We won't even play with them. That's kind of like how that went. So when I finally learned to play the game, that's when I got the most out of my old stuff. And thankfully, because I collected baseball cards with my mom when I was a child, I knew the value in making sure that the cards were kept minty fresh. And so they all stayed in a binder along with my Pokemon stuff. I don't know how it survived in such good condition. If only we had just grabbed a base set box of first edition Pokemon or like some early MTG packs in 96 when I was a kid collecting for the first time. But the reason I tell you all of that is I used my collection as a resource. The fetch lands from Zendikar when I first started playing in 2009. Modern didn't exist at the time. So when that standard season rotated, I was like, goodbye Scalding Tarns, goodbye Misty Rainforests. We kept one of each of everything because at that time our playgroup had Discovered Commander. It was a budding format and it was very popular and very fun. And so we were like, well, we got to keep one of each of all of our cards. And so I did have that mentality, but until the Arid Mesa, I wanted to tell you that entire story so that you could see kind of like where my mentality was. I was like, sell stuff that I'm not using. But this card right here at that pre-release, I remember looking it up, and I remember after the pre-release, I was like, oh my God, this card, it's freaking $150. This is amazing. I was like, this is such a treasure. I was like, this thing's awesome. I posted a picture on Instagram, and I just remember being like so thrilled that I pulled it. I was like, you know what? Maybe I have the magic touch. Maybe I'm going to be the one who just opens tons of expeditions. No. I should have quit while I was ahead. I should have quit while I was way ahead, batting 1,000 after that pre-release. It was really cool in the pre-release, leaving this up and playing it and using it just to thin out my deck a little bit. It was nice to see the opponent's reaction. So we haven't brought up Oath of the Gatewatch yet, but Battle for Zendikar came out in 2015 in October, and shortly after that, Oath of the Gatewatch in January of 2016. So it was in those months and through 2016 where I ended up spending so much money. I ended up spending like $3,000. And the reason that I remember I spent $3,000, and it might have been like $3,500 if I recall correctly. The reason is because my local game store does an incentive where if you're a member, you get a 1% cash back at the end of the year in December. And so everything that you purchase in the store, you get 1% back in December to be used as store credit. So I remember going in and I had like $35 store credit. I was like, whoa, what? And they were like, yeah, you got $35, Jake. What do you want to spend it on? It was like a time machine so that I can go back and not spend $3,000. Now, this includes pre-releases. It includes drafts and events and maybe some snacks that I bought. But I was spending roughly between like $250 and $300 a month at my LGS just cracking Battle for Zendikar and Oath of the Gatewatch. Now, Oath of the Gatewatch is a continuation of Battle for Zendikar's storyline, and it has the exact same gimmick as BFZ. There are these expedition lands within the draft product that exist. They exist across the bundle product, they're in pre-release kits, and they're different. So Battle for Zendikar has 25. It has the fetch lands, the shock lands, and it has the 5 cards that were the cycle of fetchable lands that came out of Battle for Zendikar, the regular cards, the regular land cycle that's in that set. Now, the Oath of the Gatewatch lands, they're a little bit more lackluster, but they have some really important hits like Ancient Tomb, Wasteland, and cards like that. So it's cards that are a little bit more niche, but very useful. But overall, Battle for Zendikar just has better expedition lands because it has the shock lands and the fetch lands. And those are just useful across so many different formats. How did I spend $3,000? Well, it went a lot like this. Myself and other degenerates would get around the counter of the LGS and someone would be like, hey, give me 10 packs of Battle for Zendikar. And then everybody would hover around them as they open. And then when everybody would see, oh, it's just a bunch of junk like Painful Truths and Desolation Twin. After that, they would be like, all right, now somebody else would be like, give me 10 more packs. And so we would all just hover around, watch each other, and then gauge when we would want to jump in and open some packs out of the box. Now, if somebody pulled an Expo, the box was dead, but we would go through so many boxes a night where people are just like, yo, give me 10, give me 5 here. People are trying to snipe it. And you would sometimes, like with like 5 or 6 people, go through like 3 or 4 boxes in a night at the LGS, just gambling. I guess this video is kind of about accountability. This was like the only time that my LGS owner was like, Jake, you're cut off. And I don't even think it was the owner. I think it was just one of the mindful employees that happened to be like an acquaintance and a friend of mine. He was like, Jake, you're done. I think I had spent like $160 just cruising through boxes, and he could see I was disappointed. And he was like, I'm going to let you buy like 6 more packs and then you're done after that. And that was it, man. And I was like, wait, this is crazy. And this is starting to really add up. And so this is how I accumulated so much Battle for Zendikar. Now that you're caught up, we can actually get into what I opened for the money that I spent. And you can see whether or not I came out ahead, or you can see if I'm behind. And probably based on the thumbnail of this video, it didn't go so well. Okay, so now that I've properly laid the framework of this video, we're going to get into the part where we're going to see what I actually got for all of that money spent. And we'll show you a couple things here, and then I'm going to get into some specific cards. That way we can look more closely at what the real damage was, or maybe I came out ahead. We'll see. First, we have this big box here. This box in front of you, along with this, these are all Battle for Zendikar commons. These ones here are Korean because I actually bought some products in different languages. The reason was, well, back then, Japanese cards, Korean cards, stuff like that, they were considered more rare. And so I figured, well, if I do pull a Gideon, if I do pull an Ulamog, this is going to be really good. If I get it in foil, then I'll be able to have something super rare. So tons of my Battle for Zendikar commons, as you can see right here, are in Korean. Now these are all English. This is why, and it's funny, it's a meme. I've been organizing my collection now for a couple years. And the reason is because for a long time I would just buy and not organize, and I would miss out on opportunities. Certain cards would go through a price spike and I just didn't know where they were and I wasn't able to sell them. And so that's the kind of stuff that I want to avoid in the future. So these cards here, these are all English Battle for Zendikar commons. This is just bulk English, just boxes of this stuff. And rather than sift through all of this, which I know would be a super interesting video to just look at all of the commons, I figured it would be more fun to highlight this absurdity with a few different piles of cards. So let's get this out of the way. Now I bought significantly less Oath of the Gatewatch, and that's what this box is. These are all just Oath of the Gatewatch commons, which again is very similar to Battle for Zendikar. It's in that same storyline. It came after Battle for Zendikar. And then in here, these are just all Battle for Zendikar uncommons. So what we're going to do is, rather than look through all of these, we're going to look at some specific uncommons that were popular in the set. This is going to kind of highlight the sheer velocity of just how much I ripped through. And there are not a lot of cards from Battle for Zendikar that are very good, as we already talked about in how much of this product was opened. All of these are play sets or more of just like some of the uncommons that were actually a highlight in this set. I just opened so much of this stuff. I mean, Zulaport Cutthroat, this is a good Aristocrats piece here. I'm sure that anybody who plays EDH has heard of Zulaport. And to open this many of these uncommons, it just takes so much product. Retreat to Coral Helm, this is a pretty good card. Just play sets of these. Vampiric Rites. This is a fun one. Another good Aristocrats card. Let you sacrifice. Just mountains of these. And then hold tight, because we're going to look at some other stuff that's pretty fun too. I just wanted to show these. Sylvan Scrying, rest in peace to Tron. And it's funny because so much of this was open that even these cards, which are very good, you know, like sometimes you'll have uncommons that do well over time, but even these, which are really great cards, have just not really done anything in price. I mean, it's like they're good. I think Zulaport might be a $1 card. They're not like super expensive, and even though they came out in 2015, they've not really, you know, retained any kind of value. So let's show these off, because this is really fun. These are piles of tokens. All right, now I've done my due diligence and I've put them in piles of 36. I've even sorted them as well, because some of these are really funny. So what's significant about 36? Look at all these emblems. What's significant about piles of 36, I'm sure most of you know, is obviously that so many packs are in a draft box. So each of these piles that I'm putting here, and this is why I'm so happy that I organized, each of these piles represents a box. Look at all these octopussies. So many. Dragons, Omnath tokens. Just a mass of Omnath tokens. And that is a mythic token, so that doesn't show up very often. Eldrazi Scions, core allies. Look at all these Eldrazi scones. And this is why it's so important to track your spending. You know, it's so crazy, man. I look back on this and I'm like, Jake, dude, what were you even doing? What was your thought process here? Just tokens on tokens on tokens. And what's so great about this video is that now that I've made it, I can finally get rid of some of this stuff. So these right here, and there's these here, but these are not in a pile of 36, but these are like some Desolation Twin tokens. These piles here, they represent 12 boxes by themselves. So those are boxes that were approximately 120 bucks a piece. I have already pared down some Battle for Zendikar. I donated some cards. I got rid of some stuff a while back. Going to be doing a massive pare down after this. But yeah, pretty wild to like look at all of it when you're able to go through the whole collection, get it all out of every single box. I have so much stuff. I wish you could see how many cards I have here because it's like, it's ridiculous, but it is very eye-opening to see it all and look back, and it's such a shame. I mean, a lot of these cards have not retained their value, and it's because so much of it was opened chasing expeditions. I want to go over a couple of the memes before we talk about the expeditions. These were some of the cards that when you'd be opening packs, you'd have a night of just degeneracy where you're just opening. And these were some of the cards that kind of stood out and they became memes. And shout out to Martin who coined, he was like, oh, the painful truths. Which is, the painful truth is, you probably shouldn't be opening so many packs. So this card really stood out as a meme. I went ahead and I pulled all these old rares. Drowner of Hope. This was when you're opening so many packs and it's just like your hopes are just going down the drain. You just become devoid of all emotion. And you just kind of feel dead inside. That's the Drowner of Hope. That was the meme back then. If you were opening this card as well. Now this was another one. Shout out to Martin who he would say Desolation Dollar because that's what this card was worth at the time when you would open it. Desolation Twins, just a 10-10 that brings a 10-10. Pretty ridiculous card. If you could ramp to this and get to this, I mean, this is an amazing card in limited, but I mean, it's really just some junk. I guess maybe if you have some like doubling season action going on, Desolation Twin could be pretty cool. But yeah, and then this is just the worst card in the world. Prism Array. Converge sucks. I was talking about earlier that some of the mechanics in here, they were just kind of lackluster, and Converge was one of them. This is just really, really, really bad. For 5 mana, I could think of so many different things that I would rather invest in, so got all of these old Prism Arrays. And then even Ruinous Path, Awaken. Awaken never really took off either. It's like for an additional cost, you can cast a spell and then you're able to animate one of your lands. But like this kind of became a meme as well. Oh, you're opening so many packs, you're on a Ruinous Path. Just wanted to share that because I remember these being kind of like cards that we would highlight as we were opening. You would just be like, oh god, Drowner of Hope, Painful Truths, Prism Array. Just awful, awful cards. So even with all of that I just showed you, which is absolutely no value at all, I do think it's still worth it to talk about the expedition lands because there is a little bit of value there. Now, there's 2 different piles we're going to discuss. The first one is going to be this pile here. And this pile is important because these are the cards that I actually pulled from packs. Now, we already talked about the Arid Mesa. This was the card that I pulled at the pre-release. This is the card that had me opening Battle for Zendikar in a big way and really kicked off this spending spree that I'll never forget and hopefully you can learn from. The other cards that we pulled, and I'll go ahead and pull up the prices so that you can look, are a Cascade Bluffs that came out of Oath of the Gatewatch. There's a Godless Shrine that I got like toward the tail end of Zendikar when I wasn't really buying it that much. I think I went and I picked up like 6 packs at the end and pulled this. Then there was a Flooded Grove, which also was on the list with Cascade Bluffs. This was in that cycle in Oath of the Gatewatch. And then there was a Scalding Tarn. And kind of like I was talking about earlier, where we would open packs and packs and packs of this stuff. This was actually opened at a draft. And the way that I got the Scalding Tarn, which is pretty funny, beautiful card, love this card. The way that I got the Scalding is as soon as the draft ended, I saw that nobody at the table had opened an expedition from that box. So I went up to the counter. I didn't even start building my deck. I just like sat my cards there, most of the people at the store I trust, and I know that no one's going to mess with my stuff. So I just went up to the counter and I was just like, yo, give me what's left in that box. And I think it was like maybe like 6 packs, and in one of those was the Scalding Tarn. And it was behind a Zada Hedron Grinder, a card that was downshifted from rare to uncommon recently. And yeah, most of the set is trash, but there would be these moments that were really amazing where you would pull something awesome, and this was one of those moments. The other cards are the Godless, the Cascade Bluffs. You're going to see some cards in this video that have prices on them, and that's just kind of like a time capsule. A lot of these haven't really been priced in a long time, years really, and I just kind of keep that stuff on there as a reminder of what stuff was. The Flooded Grove, and then the Arid that we already talked about. Now the other pile that we need to discuss, let's set these to the side here, are these. Now this is a set of expeditions that I acquired after Battle for Zendikar, and I either acquired these through trades or I bought them straight up on the secondary market after the set came out. So let's go ahead and take a look at each of those. Graven Cairns, this was purchased for around $30 to $35 on eBay. Fun fact about the Arid Mesa over here is I actually have had 3 of these total. 2 of them were opened, one at the pre-release. Annie actually opened one as well out of a pack behind an Ulamog. I'll pull up the Instagram post so you can see that. And then one Arid Mesa I bought for $100 shortly after BFZ came out. The one that I bought off eBay, I traded straight up for the Watery Grave, and what's fun is that this Shockland, because it has blue, has outpaced the Arid Mesa, even though it's a fetch land. This card, just because Shocklands are so wanted and so loved, this card has done really well and has actually appreciated in value a good bit since I traded it at around like $90 to $100 price point. Sacred Foundry, you can see I just bought this straight up for 75 bucks, or that might have been what I had priced it at. I do remember buying one of these from one of my buddies for like $65 to $70. This Misty, this was purchased between, God, I really wish that I kept accurate records of eBay, but I would have to guess from around $180 to $200. This would have been a few months after Battle for Zendikar came out, and I just, at that point, we'd kind of seen that these cards were so difficult to come by that I was like, well, I'm not going to sleep on it. I'm just going to put the money into the Misty Rainforest, and thankfully it's gone up since that absurd price. Ancient Tomb. This is a card that's really amazing. It was traded at around a price like this. During Kaladesh, I picked up extra copies of Mana Vault for $150 a piece. I opened one, and then I bought 2 more for $300 total, $150 a piece. So I traded a Mana Vault Masterpiece from Kaladesh for this Ancient Tomb. And since then, both of them have gone up in price. I actually traded, because at that time, Mana Vault hadn't gone through the big correction to like 350 to 400s. And so it was a little bit behind Ancient Tomb at the time. And so I think there was a foil flooded strand that I traded as well from Khans of Tarkir, along with the Mana Vault that got me to the Ancient Tomb. This card is really beautiful. Again, these are all pre-variant era cards. This is all before Wizards of the Coast shifted into this big push the variants into overdrive. These are actually rare cards, so it was like really hard to come by these. We had another Sacred Foundry, and I believe this might have been in a trade or an eBay purchase, but I never paid around like more than 60 or 65 for one of the shocks that didn't have blue. And then finally Horizon Canopy, and this is a card that it was a big piece in Boggles, but after it was reprinted, you know, that scarcity was satiated, and this card sits around 40 bucks. This full lot of cards, all of them combined, what we've just talked about, I have them plugged into TCG Player, which is giving us like a medium or a low price for them. All of them together, $1,645. 1645.19. Now that's, we already know I spent $3,000 at the LGS that year minimum. I believe I got between $30 to $35 back at the end of the year on that 1% cash back. The entire lot, we can already see I'm in the red. We already know that, like, the Ulamog that I pulled, that's a negligible difference. It's like maybe a $40 card. There was maybe another Ulamog that got put into my cube or something, so that's like 40 or 50 bucks. We had all of the uncommons, which we know aren't worth anything. Maybe that whole stack of Zulaport Cutthroats is worth like maybe $25. So if most of this stuff is just absolutely at the bottom, and all of this stuff here is where all the value is, we're totally behind. So let's talk about just the cards here that were pulled from packs, which is what this entire video is about. How many cards did I pull on this expedition hunt where I spent $3,000 at least? These right here are currently worth $575.65. So I am at minimum a $2,500 loss if we're just looking at expeditions. Sure, we can nickel and dime all of the uncommons and the rares. We could go look through my binders and find, I believe I pulled a foil Omnath once, which is, you know, there's a little bit of value there. But the Desolation Dollars, the Painful Truths, the Drowner of Hope, it's just, it's not enough to come back. Like we said, if I had taken that $3,000 now, the money that I spent chasing Battle for Zendikar at the time, before I knew about the variant era, before I knew that we were going to get to Throne of Eldraine and Wizards of the Coast was just going to go absolutely off the rails and just print, showcase cards and secret layers, and every single card was going to have an extended art version and a variant and an etched version and a retro version. You know, obviously these cards are going to eventually fall out of the limelight. They're just going to get lost in kind of the cacophony of products. But the real players, the real collectors, the people that were there, they do know that these were actually hard to get. They were rare. I remember like maybe one every 3 boxes, one every 4 boxes, and it did ultimately kill the price of Battle for Zendikar, which is why we'll never see something like this again. Maybe there will be like some sort of special card that pops up. You know, we have the 1-of-1 ring that's coming out of Lord of the Rings, but we know it's only going to be in collector boxes. Draft boxes, they get like the alternate art cards sometimes. You know, we see those pop up to kind of give draft boxes some flair, but I don't think we're ever going to see a draft product again that has these actual treasure cards in it. It just doesn't make sense. This was an experiment along the way that got us to where we are now. If I had taken $3,500 in addition to, like you saw, some of the other lands that I just bought outright, if I had taken that $3,500 and put it into expeditions today, based on what our current MTG Finance, like zeitgeist, or however that market looks, with all of the variants, secret layer products, every collector product has its own gimmick. There's serialized cards, and you can see that when everything is special, nothing is really special. These cards that we all thought were going to be priceless treasures, and some of the masterpieces from Kaladesh do have a really good price point. Looking at Mana Crypt, looking at Soul Ring, there's so many different flashy versions of cards that even the expeditions, like, they've had trouble growing in price. A lot of them have kind of stagnated for years. I don't think any of us could ever have seen just how much product there was going to be and how massive this was going to be, how different it was going to be. Maybe some of you did, but I definitely didn't see it coming in this big of a way, with serialized cards and just all these different collector products. We can even see with March of the Machine and Ragavan. Ragavan got this masterpiece treatment that was originally established all the way back in Kaladesh. It's kind of like Kaladesh, you know, it was an extension of Battle for Zendikar. And that experimentation, they're kind of putting a button on it. They're like, wait, we've brought it full circle. We've brought it full circle, folks. We've brought it all the way from Kaladesh, and this was what we were going for. This masterpiece frame. That means that when we go back to Kaladesh, that masterpiece frame is going to be the showcase frame. And people who don't know the difference between the old showcase cards and the new ones, this is all part of MTG's history. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been informative. I hope it's something that is interesting to you. And if you did like it, maybe check out one of these videos that you're about to see come up in your recommended. One of them's about this guy who had his whole collection stolen and the steps that he took to get it back. And the other one's about MTG and the satanic panic of the 90s and how a small town took MTG all the way to the Supreme Court. If you enjoyed the video, click like and subscribe. Hope to see you again in the future. Goodbye.